start again. It's a rants thing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Jayden Bryce Show, the show where we talk about the hottest topics in the world of sports. I'm your host, Jayden, and I'm glad to be with you all today. Got a very action-packed show. Obviously, the Super Bowl is on the rise, but there's been a lot of NFL stories that's been occurring over the last couple of days. Coaching hires, and also the headline of today's show, Bill Belichick is not going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Kind of crazy coming out of my mouth, but it's the truth. As of a couple of days ago, as of Tuesday, Bill Belichick is officially not going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. So I'll give my thoughts on that. We're going to discuss the matchup in the Super Bowl between the Patriots and the Seahawks, some storylines going into that game, Joe Brady getting hired by the Bills, and lastly, I'm going to pick on the Philadelphia Eagles just a bit. Seems like they're having some troubles finding their next offensive coordinator. So that is what we have planned for today's show. But before we get into it, make sure you guys like my podcast, subscribe, check out all my YouTube videos when it pertains to reposts, reels, and all that good nature. Share the podcast to a friend and check it out as well on other platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into today's show. So obviously, as I stated previously, the headline for today's show is the news that Bill Belichick is officially been snubbed from the Hall of Fame as a first ballot head coach. Again, as I stated a while ago, kind of crazy to think about the idea of Bill Belichick not being a first ballot Hall of Famer head coach. And this is just, and the first reaction, obviously I'm going to pretty much reiterate what a lot of people have said across sports media for the last couple of days. And I'm finally getting my bite of the apple here. But this is a travesty. And I thought about two individuals in another sport. Could you imagine a day where Greg Popovich and Steve Kerr are not going to be Hall of Fame head coaches and first ballot Hall of Fame head coaches? Two out of the top 5 head coaches in the history of the National Basketball Association. Steve Kerr, who knew he was going to be as great of a head coach that he was going to be when he got hired by the Warriors. He was a questionable hire at the time, and he's went on to win multiple NBA Finals. Same with Greg Popovich. He seemed like he was able to do more with less. He didn't have these super talented players. He had Tim Duncan and all those other players, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, Kawhi Leonard, and it's somewhat peaking at it, starting to get to his prime. So he had some good players, but we're talking about two coaches who had key stars and key players across the board. Even a guy like Steve Curry had Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and all those type guys. And we're starting to crucify Bill Belichick for not getting into the Hall of Fame, being a first ballot Hall of Famer, because he played with players, or not even players, but he had the best player and the best quarterback in the history of the NFL in Tom Brady. And a multitude of other players who contributed to the effort of him winning 6 Super Bowls with the New England Patriots. So just because he had the best quarterback in the history of the National Football League, that doesn't give us the right as voters to crucify the man and holding that against him and not allowing him to be a first ballot Hall of Famer like he deserves to be. From what I've researched and from what everybody has said, off the field issues really aren't in huge consideration when it comes to the Hall of Fame. Granted, a couple years ago with T.O., obviously that had a lot to do with the reason why he wasn't a first ballot Hall of Famer. It was because of his off the field antics. But in the committee bylaws, so to speak, it's not in the documents or however you want to put it, what word you want to use, but it's not in the bylaws that is to be put in consideration when voting for select person in the Hall of Fame, National Football Hall of Fame. Now, in baseball, they put that in consideration because it's in the bylaws, but it's not verbatim in the bylaws in the NFL Hall of Fame that off the field issues is in consideration when you're dealing with who gets elected to the Hall of Fame. Yes, I'm talking about to Deflategate and Spygate, because that is ultimately the reason why everybody or whoever the voters were, granted, they needed 40 out of 50 votes to be elected as a first round to pass to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And obviously, he did not get to 40 votes. He probably got 37, 38, who knows? We don't know the number quite right now, and it's pretty confidential information. Who knows if we will ever know? But that's the reason why. That's the only reason we can come up with that. That's pretty much stuff outside of Bill Belichick's resume. Because what is Bill Belichick's resume? He's won 8 Super Bowls, 6 with the Patriots. He won the other 2 as an assistant coach. He has the most playoff wins in NFL history. He's the catalyst of one of the biggest dynasties in the history of sports. And he helped coach one of the best players in the history of the National Football League in Tom Brady, and a plethora of other players who turned out to have great careers. So just off of Bill Belichick's resume, it's an absolute no-brainer that he should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. Because if Bill Belichick is not a first ballot Hall of Famer, I'm sure guys like Tom Brady are sitting there thinking, wow, am I going to be probably left out of a first ballot? Because the day that Tom Brady is not going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, when he's arguably the best player to ever lace up a pair of cleats and throw the pigskin, is not going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer because he was part of this. He was part of Spygate. He was part of Deflategate. So if they're going to hold these measurables against Bill Belichick, who knows? They might as well hold it against Tom Brady. This is just absolutely atrocious. And the amount of people who is out here defending this idea, I was a little disappointed in Colin Cowherd pretty much defending the idea. Like, hey, Spygate, Deflategate, you should wait. I'm just paraphrasing what he said, but he pretty much is promoting the idea that Bill Belichick, deserves to wait a year because of the accusations that he had with Spygate and Deflategate. I just don't initially agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. And the person who has been highlighted through this whole issue, and the reason why the committee and those involved are very concerning, and this thing can get pretty messy, because as of last night, the Hall of Fame committee, or whoever their media, their PR person, however you want to put it, they obviously put out a statement yesterday in paper. They are going to go back. I don't know how they're going to do it, but they're going to pretty much go back over the records and go back over the process of the selection pertaining to the Bill Belichick not getting into being a first ballot Hall of Famer. They're going back and making sure nobody violated the bylaws of the selection process, pretty much. Seeing if anybody pretty much had foul play in this. That is something that they released, the Hall of Fame released in a PR statement as of yesterday. So they're looking into this. So we're probably going to get some information in the next couple of days to see what really happened and what really transpired with the whole selection process. Because of this one individual, and this is where it pretty much started all this controversy. Bill Polian. He's been to 5 Super Bowls. He's been a general manager, and he's been, is he been an owner, part owner? I can't quite remember. But I know he's been a GM for a couple teams. Now, he won a Super Bowl with the Indianapolis Colts when he had Peyton Manning, and he's been to Super Bowls with the Bills, having some type of say with the Buffalo Bills. And this guy, as I've researched, he's had a little bit of history with Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick at the time, because the Brady Manning era. So they have their little bit of differences. But this guy, Bill Polian, he was one of the first ones that people in the media really wanted to point out with this situation getting fishy. Because Bill Polian said in the media, his own words, he stated that he didn't even remember who he voted for. And then obviously somebody, I don't know exactly who the source was, went behind him as of yesterday and let everyone know that Bill Polian actually voted for Bill Belichick to get to the Hall of Fame as a first balloter. But he was one of the questioned individuals with this whole situation, and pretty much making us question how legitimate, or how can we legitimize the Hall of Fame going forward. We've already seen previous Hall of Famers like the Deion Sanders. A couple of years ago, he pointed out that it felt like the Hall of Fame isn't as prestigious as it used to be, because it feels like they're putting anybody, verbatim, however you want to say it, they're putting anybody in the Hall of Fame. So how can we legitimize it going forward? I don't know. It's the same thing with the Pro Bowl. Literally, the NFL's had a questionable week this week with the addition of Shedeur Sanders on Monday, making it to the Pro Bowl. And then we have this whole thing here with Bill Belichick not being the first ballot Hall of Famer. This is a bad day for the NFL. This is a bad week for the NFL. Pretty embarrassing that you have a guy in Shedeur Sanders who is going to make the Pro Bowl when he had more interceptions than touchdowns, only played 8 games. And then you have the best head coach, arguably, in the history of the National Football League, not go into the Hall of Fame as a first balloter. It's embarrassing. Absolutely embarrassing. And it is a travesty, and there's no other way to put it. How can we legitimize the Hall of Fame going forward? It's a question that we need to ask. Because if Bill Belichick is not a first ballot Hall of Famer, who knows? There might be a day when Tom Brady won't be a first ballot Hall of Famer. It puts into question. It's just embarrassing. There's no other way to put it. Anybody with a right mind would say, without a shadow of a doubt, that Bill Belichick is a first ballot Hall of Famer as a head coach. As much as he's done for the NFL and the accomplishments that he has had in his career. If that resume doesn't warrant a first ballot Hall of Famer, there's plenty of guys. I don't know the approximate number, how many Hall of Famers they have in the Pro Football Hall of Fame right now, but I promise you, if Bill Belichick is not a Hall of Famer, 95, I can probably say confidently, 95 to 96, 97% of the guys in the Pro Football Hall of Fame don't deserve it either. Absolute embarrassment. Absolute embarrassment by the NFL. All right, now that we're done with that and I'm on that off that soapbox, let's go ahead and move into the matchup. Super Bowl 60 in San Francisco. We got Patriots and the Seattle Seahawks. And I kind of combined the two. I pretty much wrote it up just talking about each separate team because I'm not really talking about the matchup per se. I'm kind of just talking about each team individually. So the Seahawks right now are currently favored -4.5 here. Kind of think that's a little low at the moment. It opened at 3.5. This went up a point, so it is 4.5 at the moment. This was a matchup that was roughly Super Bowl 49, if I remember correctly. In 2015 was the last time these two franchises met. But let's go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and hit on the Patriots first because they were the most intriguing one for me. What an impressive season from Mike Vrabel, company, Robert Kraft, and everyone. Just what a phenomenal season. Nobody saw this coming. I love using this analogy, or this idea of speaking rather, that if you were to ask me, going into the season, 2025-2026 season, and you had me to guess the Patriots record, guess if they made the playoffs, and I would have looked at their schedule, I would have probably said, yeah, they could make the playoffs as like a 7 seed, but I definitely wouldn't have had them winning the division. I definitely would have gave that crown to Josh Allen. But this is a team who had an easy schedule. You had a skeptical quarterback in Drake May who was going into year 2. Last year, he didn't wow you. You really didn't get a sense of Drake May was going to transition into this type of player this season because he didn't even start last year. They were starting, who was it they started? The Patriots started in favor for him. Jacoby Brissett, I think it was. But So you had that going on, and you had a questionable roster and a head coach, Mike Vrabel, who we didn't really question Mike Vrabel, but how is this whole dynamic going to change? You're talking about a Mike Vrabel who you're not coaching a Titans team that you had no emotional ties to. We're talking about a Mike Vrabel team head coach Mike Vrabel, that has emotional ties to the franchise because he played for them and won a Super Bowl with them. That's a whole different dynamic than coaching for a team that you never played for. So there was a lot of question marks revolving that. And we got to give credit to Mike Vrabel. We got to give supreme credit to Drake May. And most importantly, supreme credit to Robert Kraft. Robert Kraft and his ability to move off Gerard Mayo last year. I've said it already, but I'm going to restate it again, beating a dead horse here. He's been on the record saying that was a big decision for him. That was a big financial decision to move off of a head coach. He said he lost a lot of money, but man, does it seem to pay off. You got rid of Bill Belichick 2 years ago after going 3-14. Last year under Gerard Mayo, you won your first game of the season, and it kind of felt like, oh, Patriots might be back. But they go on again to be 3-14. And even in the beginning of this year, you lose to the Raiders, you lose to the Steelers, and it was kind of like you felt like the same thing was going to happen again. But we got to give credit to Robert Kraft for getting Mike Vrabel, a guy who's been to an AFC Championship game with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. If you went to an AFC Championship with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, the skies is the limit with a guy like Drake May. And Josh McDaniels, got to give him credit too. He really, for some reason, just loves being an offense coordinator. Head coaching thing has never worked out. I know he's been the head coach for the Raiders. I know he was a coach previously for another team. I just cannot quite remember who it was. But we know that his head coach, I want to say it was the Broncos. But we know that his stint as a head coach has just been absolutely abysmal. But when it comes to developing quarterbacks, he had Mac Jones as a Pro Bowl caliber player. And after he left, Mac Jones looks like he forgot how to play quarterback. Granted, Mac Jones played pretty good under Kyle Shanahan, but that's Kyle Shanahan. So obviously done that, and he developed Tom Brady, the best quarterback of all time. So with all of that put in consideration, even the roster, and I've said this multiple times, like this roster is nowhere near the caliber out of a lot of teams in the AFC. Out of the teams that are eliminated currently right now in the AFC, I would have took the Chargers roster over the Patriots, and the Patriots beat them. I would have took Denver's roster over the Patriots, and the Patriots beat them, granted without their starting quarterback in Bo Nix. The Houston Texans might have the argument because they have a super, super stout defense. Offensively, they have a lot to be desired, but you can make the argument. And even the Jaguars. I think the Jaguars from top to bottom have a better roster than what the Patriots did. And even going into this matchup in the Super Bowl, there's without a shadow of a doubt, everybody with a right mind would say, yeah, Seattle from top to bottom has the best roster. But with all that put in consideration, the idea that the New England Patriots are representing the AFC in the Super Bowl, it's just absolutely phenomenal. It's phenomenal. It shows how a well-oiled machine and a well-run organization the New England Patriots really are. Shows how great of an owner Robert Kraft is, the ability to pivot off of a head coach like that, even pivot off of a guy in Bill Belichick who you won 6 Super Bowls with. You get rid of him. Tom Brady isn't your quarterback no more. And in a matter of 7 years, you're already back in the Super Bowl. That's phenomenal. You move off of your Hall of Fame quarterback, going to be a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback. As we stated before, should have been Hall of Fame head coach, first ballot Hall of Fame coach in Bill Belichick. You move off those guys. And in 7 years, you move off of Tom Brady. You even draft Mac Jones, draft the quarterback. You move off of him too. You have a new head coach, Gerard Mayo. Move off him too. Draft a new quarterback, get a new head coach, and in their first year together, they're representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. That is just a testament of how well of a coach Mike Vrabel is, how good of a player potentially, and that Drake May could be under the stewardship of Josh McDaniels. And it most importantly is a testament of Robert Kraft and how he's a phenomenal owner. I know Robert Kraft is currently not in the NFL Hall of Fame, if I remember correctly, but without a shadow of a doubt, I think he should be. He's one of the best owners that has been a part of this game. And I don't say this lightly. He's a better owner than what Jerry Jones has been. As much credit we give to Jerry Jones and the crap that he's been through and the stuff we learned through the documentaries, what Robert Kraft has been able to do is just phenomenal. He's been unselfish. He's let everything go behind the scenes. You don't really hear from him much. And he won 6 Super Bowls in a manner of a 20-year dynasty. And who knows, we might be on the presence of a new one. Now, going into this matchup next Sunday, it's not an easy one. It's a pretty daunting task. This is a very, very good Seattle Seahawks team. But even if they don't win, it's just the idea that you did all this with all of those question marks surrounding your franchise and your team. You got to be pretty confident if you are a fan and if you're even in the building for the New England Patriots. Super bright future ahead with all that in consideration. Now let's move to the Seahawks. They were pretty similar to the Patriots in many of ways, but they are a whole lot more dominant force than the Patriots. Just pure dominance. They had a harder schedule and division in comparison to the Patriots. They also had a skeptical quarterback who one can argue might have been more skeptical than Drake May. And in the final weeks of the season, they just established their dominance. Now, it pertains to the harder schedule. It was the hardest division in football. You had the Niners, the Rams, and the Seahawks. All three of them respectively made the playoffs, and all of them had 12-plus wins. Super hard division. And granted, the Cardinals, they didn't end the season great, but they were like 2-0 to start out the season, and they had a couple good players, so they weren't an easy out, especially when Kyler Murray was quarterback at the time. And even Jacoby Brissett was playing some good football here or there. But it definitely was a harder division. We just thought about that. Harder schedule in comparison to the Patriots because the Patriots had the easiest schedule in the NFL. And they had a skeptical quarterback. We're talking about a guy in Sam Darnold. I just got done talking about him on Monday, giving him his flowers. Let's be honest. We're talking about a guy who thought his career was over. He thought he was going to have his LinkedIn profile ready. The Jets got rid of him. Didn't know if he was ever going to be the quarterback people thought he was going to be. Then he goes to Carolina. Stinks it up some more. And then he takes the bright lights away from him at the starting quarterback role. Then you go to San Francisco. You be a backup quarterback, learn under Kyle Shanahan. I want to say he done that for maybe a year or two. And then you go to the Minnesota Vikings after that. And you get back in that starter spotlight and you led the team to a 14-win record. Absolutely phenomenal. But in the last couple games that he needed to be great to be the number 1 seed, he didn't do that. And then was a first-round exit because of his poor play in the playoffs. So going into this season, there was a whole lot of question marks with Sam Darnold. A lot of people really called the Seattle Seahawks crazy for investing in Sam Darnold and pivoting away from Geno Smith. Does John Snyder, is he not laughing at everyone now? After all the crazy claims that were being out there said about him and his bizarre move to not only move off of not move off of Geno Smith, but you also moved off of DK Metcalf, who was a Pro Bowl caliber player. Great player. A little overrated, but he's a pretty good player. He's a good wide receiver. A lot of teams will be questioning themselves, pivoting off of a guy of his caliber. But he did. They felt like Jackson Smith and Jigba was the guy to be the number 1 role, and obviously they hit a home run on that, and they just have players everywhere. So just from across the board, from top to bottom, this roster, this team, they're a whole lot more dominant force than what the Patriots have been all year. But the question going into this game is, can Sam Darnold replicate the performance that he had in the NFC Championship game? We know that Sam Darnold was firing on all cylinders. That's one of the best football games he's played in his career. Even with a oblique injury, he was on time. He did not make the big mistakes, the back-breaking mistakes, turning the ball over. And he scored a significant amount of points, 31 points. And he was the ultimate reason why the Seahawks beat the Rams in the NFC Championship game. Because the defense did not show up like I thought they were going to. Can the defense play better going forward? I think so. Obviously, the Patriots do not have the same caliber of offensive firepower that the Los Angeles Rams have. But that is going to be the ultimate question going in for Seattle. Is Sam Darnold going to double down on the success that he had in the NFC Championship game? I don't see a reason why he can't do that. I honestly do not see a major difference from playing in Levi Stadium to your home stadium. Obviously, you get the advantage because it's your home crowd. It's the 12. It's the hardest place to play in the NFL. but you're going to be playing in a stadium that you're very comfortable playing in. Heck, you just played there probably four weeks ago. So you have that type of advantage. Just a place that Sam Darnold and the Seahawks are going to be very familiar playing at. But I know the Patriots fans are going to travel well. I know they're all the way slam on the other side of the coast. But I know they're going to travel really well. So there's going to be some Patriots fans in the building. But I really do favor the Seahawks in this game by a landslide. Both teams, very interestingly so, had similar storylines to themselves. There was a stat that came out a couple of days ago that said, betting-wise, this was one of the most unlikely odded matchup in the betting world. Super, super phenomenal to think about it that way. So great stuff to see. Cannot wait for the matchup. I think it's going to be a far more interesting game than a lot of people make it out to be. But do I see a scenario where Seattle will win by 10 points? I do. I hope Mike Vrabel and company will shock me. I think Mike Vrabel are going to have the guys up and ready to go. But I'm really, really leaning Seattle here, and I will not be surprised if they win and cover the spread at -4.5. It'll be interesting to see how this line moves and sways in the next couple of days, even in the final days leading up to the game next Sunday. So let's go ahead and move on to something else. Joe Brady. Pretty shocking move here. The Buffalo Bills have officially hired Joe Brady to be their head coach under Josh Allen and company. I was pretty torn apart from this hire. Obviously, the bowling balls and the dominoes are starting to fall in the NFL coaching searches. A lot of people, Jesse Minter's been hired, Robert Saleh, from the top of my head. The Browns just hired their head coach yesterday. The Steelers. So there's been a lot of names that a lot of job positions are being filled in the head coaching space. And pretty much, I say that to say this. All the great, and I thought great, S tier, you can even say, head coaching candidates have pretty much been hired. And you're the Buffalo Bills, who made a pretty dumb decision, might I say. Really idiotic decision to pivot off from Sean McDermott. And I believe Colin Cowherd, I really, really believe this when he says it. When you move off of a head coach, what is your contingency plan? Obviously, smartingly so, you want to have a coach who obviously is without a doubt a no-brainer, a better option than the current one that you had. So when you pivot off a coach, you better be darn sure that the guy that you bring in is going to be astronomically better than what you already had. And my initial reaction is I have no faith he will be better than Sean McDermott. Sean McDermott had 8 playoff wins. He was 8-8. But in the time span that Sean McDermott was winning that many playoff games, John Harbaugh only won 3. Sean McDermott had to go up against a dynasty in the Kansas City Chiefs in the prime of Josh Allen's career. And even this season, with a roster that was not that good, and Sean McDermott voiced that, and that ultimately got him fired. But hiring within, nobody is normally comfortable with. No matter how many times we've seen it happen around the league, 9 times out of 10, this idea never ends well. Because it's too comfortable of a hire. To be successful in the NFL and to be successful in any type of thing in life, you got to get uncomfortable. It's a pretty cliche statement to say, but it's pretty true. And that is not what the Buffalo Bills did. Hiring within, you want to change in the Bills culture. But Joe Brady is part of the old regime. And one could argue that Joe Brady is probably not, and I think probably will not be, better at that job than Sean McDermott. I know, Joe Brady was a young hot name coming out of LSU. He helped Joe Burrow and those guys win a national championship. But can we not remember that he had Heisman winner and one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now at the moment, Joe Burrow at quarterback. He had two All-Pro, future All-Pro, and Pro Bowl wide receivers in Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, many people's top 3 wide receivers in the NFL at the moment. A running back in Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the time, who was very good. You had Patrick Queen on that team. They had a lot of weapons. They had weapons everywhere on that roster. What I'm pointing out a defensive player, which that's obviously has nothing to do with Joe Brady, but that's just the type of team that Joe Brady, inherited at LSU. Then he goes to Carolina for a couple years with Sam Darnold. Didn't work. Then he's been with Buffalo for the last 2 years. And obviously he does not have the roster like the last guy had. What was his name? Can't quite remember. Ken Dorsey, I think was his name. You didn't have the roster that he had, so to speak, offensively, but let's be honest, that side of the ball wasn't the greatest. Granted, you got to give Joe Brady credit. He done a lot with nothing with the whole hook and ladder plays and things of that nature. But there's been multiple times this season where we kind of felt like don't love Joe Brady's play calling at sometimes. Not saying that Joe Brady was a terrible play caller. There were just some times throughout the season where Joe Brady was like, got to help Josh Allen here. Got to put him in a good position to play well. So, yeah, I'm a little underwhelmed. Totally underwhelmed. And I didn't think that Sean McDermott deserved to be fired. And the reason why I don't think Joe Brady is going to do a better job is because of the roster. The roster wasn't good. They had to get Brandon Cooks off of the streets. And he ended up being their second wide receiver on the depth chart in the last playoff game they had. Because Gabe Davis and Shavers shredded their ACLs. And Khalil Shakir, he'll probably be a number 3 on any other roster. Heck, go to Philly, go to Dallas, go to any other team who has a comparable wide receiver room, outside of maybe the Chargers off the top of my head. He's going to be like Khalil Shakir will be a 3. And he'll be a guy that you'll put in a slot. So you have Brandon Cooks as your number 2 wide receiver. And Brandon Beane somehow got promoted to president of football operations. After I think he's done a horrific job as the GM of the Buffalo Bills. He's drafted 2 Pro Bowl players in the 56 draft picks that he's had, outside of Josh Allen. And those 2 players are Deion Dawkins and James Cook. Offensive guys. Hasn't hit on a wide receiver. Hasn't even hit on no defensive players. Granted, I think the Harrison kid can be pretty good, but he can't even stay on the field at the moment. So it does not, this hire for me is just screaming, okay. It's a pretty comfortable hire. But when you even look in your own division, look at what the Patriots did. Robert Kraft made an uncomfortable move and got Mike Vrabel. And look how it's panned out. I wish Joe Brady the best. But it was reported that Josh Allen didn't have a significant say in the hire. They interviewed Brian Daboll. I thought Brian Daboll would have been a better option than Joe Brady. But granted, the way Brian Daboll was running things, Brian Daboll won Coach of the Year. There were some times you didn't love Brian Daboll's game management. So, heck, I would have probably been more in favor of giving Joe Brady a shot. But you had him. Heck, they even interviewed Phillip Rivers at one point. That's how pretty embarrassing this head coaching search was. Because there's not a lot of names that were available. All the big names are gone. And so you're kind of digging for the scraps here, these last couple teams for the coaching search. Because I think right now you still have the Cardinals, the Raiders, and there's one other team that I'm forgetting off the top of my head right now who has a head coaching vacancy. But my initial reaction was pretty much, sorry, Josh. I don't see how the grass gets greener on that side, bud. I just think it was a bad idea pivoting off from Sean McDermott. All right, now let's go ahead and have some fun here. Philadelphia Eagles made a lot of news, lots of news over the span of the last couple weeks. We know that they moved off of their offensive coordinator, Kevin Patullo, and ever since then, it seems like they're having a little bit of trouble in their OC search here. It is also reported right now that the Eagles, because the OC search is going so bad, that they're considering Nick Sirianni, Mr. Sirianni, calling plays. Somebody who needs to be calling plays because he does nothing else. All right, So here's a couple names that they have interviewed. I actually saw roughly about 30 minutes before I started filming this podcast. They're interviewing somebody else, the former Bucks offensive coordinator. Don't remember the guy's name from the top of my head. But here's a couple names that they did interview or try to talk to. I don't know if they actually interviewed them or talked to them, but they got into some type of communication with these individuals. Brian Daboll, I know for sure he interviewed. Declan Doyle, I think he's the passing game coordinator for Chicago. Charlie Wise, who is going to be the OC for the LSU and Lane Kiffin and the LSU Tigers and that whole regime. And Mike McDaniel, who took the OC job for the Chargers officially as of Tuesday. So did Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll took the OC job under Robert Saleh and the Tennessee Titans to work with Cam Ward. Why isn't this a compelling job? I'll tell you why. Because of the Philadelphia market. If you don't know, now you know. The Philadelphia market is rough. Absolutely rough. And I just saw Jordan Schultz just post about it because he's the one who really just reported the story that they're just interviewing the former offensive coordinator for the Bucks. And he was promoting the idea that he was rubbing a little bit of salt on the wound of the idea that the OC job position for the Eagles isn't flattering. And he was pretty much saying that isn't true. Because he was pointing to how previous head offensive coordinators for the Philadelphia Eagles, such as Kellen Moore, such as Shane Steichen, go on to get head coaching jobs once they depart from the Philadelphia Eagles. Well, I say that to say this. I don't think this Philadelphia Eagles team is wired the same like the Philadelphia Eagles team from 3 or 4 years ago. And I say that to say this. And I didn't even write this down. I'm showing this in for free. Do we not see the negative confrontations and the negative energy, negative relationships when it pertains to A.J. Brown and Nick Sirianni, A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts? There's been multiple reports coming from Philadelphia media, who have stated that, Jalen Hurts is kind of a pain in the you-know-what to work with. Like, the guy's not fun to work with. I don't know if that's 100% true. It's just pretty much rumors from what. I'm just going off what the beat writers and everyone in Philadelphia media, probably the toughest market in America outside of New York when it pertains to sports media. I'm just basing that off what they say. Okay, that's what they've said. So that's part of the reason why this is not as nowhere near as a compelling job as it was a couple years ago. Because yes, at the time, you had Saquon Barkley. Well, even before Saquon Barkley got there, when Shane Steichen was there. I mean, you had DeAndre Swift. You had Jalen Hurts. You had A.J. Brown. You had Devontae Smith. A very stout defense. You had all these players. And even with Kellen Moore, you added Saquon Barkley into the mix. So this was a pretty good team. But I don't think currently there's an offensive coordinator out there like a Kellen Moore's caliber. Like a Shane Steichen's caliber. Mike McDaniel and Brian Daboll were, but they didn't want the job. Why is that? It's because of Jalen Hurts. It's because it might be true that Jalen Hurts might be tough to work with. It's because of the drama in that organization, but with the offense when it pertained to A.J. Brown and Nick Sirianni, etc. So I think that's why Mike McDaniel, he liked the idea. Let me go work with Jim Harbaugh. Great culture. Doesn't have to deal with the crazy media. Get to work with Justin Herbert, who seems to be like a great guy all around. Yeah, I'd rather go do that. What about Brian Daboll? I don't have to deal with Philly media. I'm already been a head coach, so, I've already been there, done that, so I'm not dying for it. Same with Mike McDaniel. I get to work with Cam Ward, who's a pretty talented guy, shows a lot of promise. I get to work with Robert Saleh with the Tennessee Titans, who have no expectations. They'll be glad to win 6-7 games next year. No pun intended. I hate the stupid 6-7 joke. If they're 3 or 4 games below 500, Tennessee's throwing a parade. So the stakes aren't high like you would be in Philly. The Philadelphia market is rough. John Middlecoff, great podcaster. Shout out John Middlecoff. Loved the guy. He's even said it. Like, dude, there's a certain pressure when you're working in Philly. when he worked in Philly as a scout, I believe, like every day he worked in the office, like he felt like his job was on the line. Paraphrasing, he didn't say that. He didn't say that per se, but I'm just paraphrasing. So that is the type of environment that Philly brings under Jeffrey Lurie and the GM. Howie Roseman, Jesus, GM Howie Roseman. That's the type of demeanor that he brings, that they bring to the Philadelphia Eagles franchise because they want to win. And in comparison to the Chargers franchise, you know, they've not won a Super Bowl in how long? I don't even know if they've even won one. And definitely the Tennessee Titans haven't won one. So you're talking about a franchise who has high expectations versus two other franchises that Brian Daboll and Mike McDaniel hired for no expectations. And Declan Doyle, Chicago, Ben Johnson, great culture. Almost should have went to the NFC Championship. Got Caleb Williams, the quarterback. I'd rather work with him. Charlie Wise, I'd rather work with Lane Kiffin in NIL and deal with that headache instead of the NFL. Pretty telling. So why shouldn't Nick Sirianni call the plays? And if it's reported that the Eagles are considering that, at this point I just say, why not? Nick Sirianni does nothing. He doesn't call plays. And when he's had some say in calling plays, it's still been garbage. Because it was reported, what was it, the last couple weeks of the season, going into the playoffs, that Nick Sirianni started sitting in the offensive meetings. But that didn't seem to change anything about the offense. They still went pumpkin in the playoffs like they have been all year. So why not just give him the full reins? Because he does nothing. He doesn't call defense. He doesn't call plays on offense. You don't love his game management at times. But, you know, the idea is, yes, he's a Super Bowl winning coach. He's won a Super Bowl. But I have been the one to argue to say this. If you give any other coach, give Kyle Shanahan that roster with his head coaching ability, they'd have probably won 3 Super Bowls by now instead of just 1. I'm not joking. You see what Kyle Shanahan did with that roster he had this year? Let's go see what would Nick Sirianni do with that roster? Nick Sirianni would have been 3 games below 500. That's just how I feel about Nick Sirianni. And I feel like kind of that's how the league feels about Nick Sirianni. Nick Sirianni is not that great of a coach. I'm sorry. On top of that, the guy is, I'm not going to cuss because I don't cuss. It's a family-friendly show. But I promise you, I would use any negative word or negative connotation that I can bring or establish to his name as a person. He sucks. He's annoying. He's extremely annoying. His personality sucks. Granted, it fits Philly, but it just sucks. And that's the reason why A.J. Brown, we've seen multiple times where A.J. Brown was looking at Nick Sirianni like, bro, what are you doing? Especially the game, what was the game they barely won? I can't even quite remember who they played. It was towards the latter part of the season. And they barely came out with a win. And it might have been Buffalo. Yeah, it was Buffalo. And, you know, Nick Sirianni was coming out. They posted a video of him coming out into the locker rooms talking about, yeah, y'all see what? Like, dude's obnoxious. He's terrible. So why shouldn't Nick Sirianni call a place? Why not? You have nothing to lose. If he's fantastic, then we can start establishing more credit to Nick Sirianni. But if he sucks, the Eagles may be in the range for looking for a new head coach. They done it with the previous guy. Why not? Why can't they do it with Nick Sirianni? And we're talking about somebody who took him to the Super Bowl. Just like Nick Sirianni. They did the same thing. Can't quite remember the guy's name from the top of my head. But you know who I'm talking about. Peterson. Doug Peterson, yes. They did it to Doug Peterson. Went to a Super Bowl. Took it to a Super Bowl. Won a Super Bowl. Heck, he did it with Nick Foles. And they pivoted off of him. Why couldn't they? I could definitely see them doing the same with Nick Sirianni. But it's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds going into the near future. So that is the end of today. That's all I got. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, and I'll check you all on the next one. Peace, love, and positivity, y'all. See ya.